The reason I did this analysis of tariffs was because I was watching it on all the financial networks, a lot of experts analyzing the tariffs with China. And I want to show how it looks from a security standpoint. Nobody I saw was doing this. Now, I should mention that this is only the tariffs involved with China, not any other country. And when we think about tariffs, we have to consider that all of our electronic boards that we get are manufactured in China. And that's for walkie-talkies or child monitors or the big servers in companies like Amazon hosting DoD things, or computers in use in DoD and in weapon systems themselves. Most of the silicone boards in those devices come from China. This introduces a possibility of something called a supply chain vulnerability, which is a vulnerability that can be exploited. If you get your equipment from somewhere, they might be spying on you. WikiLeaks showed some examples of the FBI intercepting switches from companies like Cisco and putting spy gear in them, things like that. So this would be on a different level, though, manufacturing. And military journals have talked about the idea that spying might be occurring by China embedding chips into our electronic circuit boards. And that started appearing in military journals around 2012 or 2014 being talked about. However, what happened in October of 2017 is a major news organization, Bloomberg, published a front page story about it in their magazine. Now, before I talk about this any further, let me say that the companies that are mentioned in this article, Amazon, Apple, and Supermicro, have pushed back as forcefully as possible on this. Bloomberg, on the other hand, has not only not retracted it, but has doubled down. So it's kind of a controversy. And if you read blogs, some people are on one side or the other of this article. But obviously, the big companies have a financial reason to push back on it. And Bloomberg doesn't really have that much at stake about its reputation. That being said, maybe it's 100% wrong. Maybe it's 100% right. Could be somewhere in the middle. But it's kind of hard to detect this technology, and we'll explain why. Basically, the idea is they have embedded voltage conditioners on their boards that are pretty small, but they're hard to really determine the function of. All you could do is measure the input and the output. But in order to determine if a board is acting as a covert spy device, what you have to do is you have to measure the draw of each component on the circuit board and then subtract it from the overall voltage the board draws. If the board itself is drawing some energy, that means it's likely spying on you. That's how it's hard to determine. So we have to keep that in mind going into any negotiation with China. And also, it's important to realize that China approaches intellectual property in a completely different way. It's just a cultural thing with them. And in fact, I can't explain it to you easily why it's so different, but I do recommend a movie on Shenzhen, which is in a center of economic prosperity designated by China. It's a YouTube video. It's about 40 minutes long, but it tells how they can phototype and proof and mock things up and scale and things almost overnight. So a lot of companies from Finland and a lot of innovative small companies use their facilities there. Of course, China cost is that they steal the technology. But that's part of the given over there. But it's a good idea to watch this. And, so with that in mind, we have to think about, why does everybody use Chinese boards? Well, there's really one reason, and that is the cost of the supply chain vulnerabilities that are introduced is not overweighed by how cheap the boards. I mean, it's cheaper to use the boards than to worry about supply chain vulnerabilities, right? So under this situation, nothing's ever going to change. I mean, companies are always going to be looking at their bottom line. But in this particular case, a specific tariff would be the right approach to take on electronic components. That'll result in the components being made elsewhere. It'll lessen Chinese control of our supply chain. And whenever you put a fee coming in, that is by definition a tariff. So tariffs are getting kind of a bum rap in the news, but all it means is you're penalizing these boards because of this supply chain vulnerability. Even if it doesn't exist, the possibility that it could exist is there. And in coming to any agreement with China without tariffs, it's good to keep in mind they never work. I mean, the industrial espionage agreement lauded by the Obama administration, China did major hacks on U.S. government and private entities within 2 months of that agreement. All agreements with China are unenforceable without tariffs. Now, they are like the nicest, politest person that turns around and stabs you in the back, but they're nice to your face, but we have to judge China by its actions, not by its words. And in light of this, and looking at their agreements throughout history, nothing's going to work unless there's a strong pushback against them with tariffs. Nothing else even makes sense. I invite you to join in the comments below, and thank you for watching this.